All right, welcome in, everybody. It's the Important Nonsense Podcast. 32 teams in 32 days. Steve Bonham, Neil Smith, Mike Manning. Guys, it's the Bengals. I know Mike's thrilled. It's just we're getting these a couple of these out of the way, at least in the AFC North. Getting a few out of the way.
All the ones but the one I really care about.
Yeah, exactly. we'll get to that at some point eventually. Don't worry about it. We are recording this on July 23rd, so if any of the information seems out of date, that would be why. Everything we do is 12-team PPR, and again, we release a new episode every single day, but if you'd like to get them a couple days early, patreon.com/importantnonsense down there. Sign up for our Patreon. $3 or $5 tier gets you early access, and any tier gets you access to our Discord, so hop on in, have a conversation with us, and we will answer your questions. I haven't mentioned it in a couple episodes, but the wrap-up show, Friday, August 26th, we will go back through and update anything that may need to be updated. But let's get into it, gentlemen. The Bengals, who weren't supposed to be good last season and went all the way to the Super Bowl, and I still argue they weren't that great last season. They were all right. They caught a couple of breaks. They played okay. Their secondary played a lot better than expected, but it ultimately cost them. Mm-hmm. And here we are. So now they have flipped it. They will have, I believe, weren't they 10-7? Won that division, made the run through the playoffs and all that, something like that.
I thought they might have won. I thought they might have gotten to 11, but it's something very similar.
It was either 10-7 or 11-6.
I think they were 11-6. Great. But it's something that's
no. It was 10-7.
10-7. Okay.
10-7. So yes, 10-7, and now they have the division winners schedule this season.
That's what I was saying to you last year when we were having a private conversation where I was like, they're really shooting themselves in the foot here. You really got to win this Super Bowl because getting back is going to be a lot harder because you're going to have a much harder schedule now. And they did. This is the bed they've made. They're going to have to lie in it.
Division is going to get theoretically better this year, and they have a tougher schedule, tougher path to go. AFC in general has gotten tougher. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a rough one for the Bengals, but we'll see. Kicking it off from the top, Jungle Joe. Is there really much to discuss about Joe Burrow? I mean, I guess we can talk about, do you want him any higher than he already is in the rankings here? But I think we all have him in roughly the second or maybe high-end third tier of our QB rankings.
Yeah, he's high-end tier 3 for me. He's my QB
top of
7.
My tier 3. I just double-checked.
Yeah. The only difference is let's not even get into that. But there's one reason why that exists the way that it does, but it's a show that we'll do later. But yeah, same neighborhood, top of tier 3, and I don't know that there is that much to discuss. Mike, it seems I think you have something though that was interesting.
I just don't think that his current ADP on Fantasy Pros is QB6, and I think that's too high because of his ceiling. I don't think that he had those two massive games at the end of the season that were like 38, 36-point games.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that was whenever they just tore apart the Chiefs, and I forget the other opponent. But so those were the only big games that he had the entire season.
The Raiders? I don't know.
Might have been their secondary.
They played the Raiders earlier in the year.
Yeah.
That was like a 12-6 game or something. But
Baltimore. Chiefs and Baltimore.
Same problem. Everybody's hurt. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just don't see that he doesn't have the rushing upside, obviously. But even in comparison, he's got all these weapons. But this team in the beginning of the season was a run-first team. First half of the season, they were really focused on the run. Second half of the season, once T. Higgins returned from injury, they started to pass the ball more. And even then, he was just hovering around like 20 points with give or take 2 points here or there. So I just think that the QB6 is a bit much. Like if you look at Tom Brady's at QB9. His offense hasn't changed drastically. Chris Godwin will be back at some point, and Russell Gage is going to upgrade at wide receiver 3 easily. Tom Brady had 9 games of 25 points or more. Joe Burrow had 3, and I told you 2 of them.
Yeah.
So it's just temper expectations for this high ceiling.
And this is where
that's a good point. Yeah.
Well, I was just saying real quick, this is where I'd like to do our usual PSA about teams that do well in rankings inflation and projections inflation,
Mhm.
the Bengals is a prime candidate, depending on where you look, where you're getting your information from, to where you could be suffering from some inflation. Just because it was a good team last year and there's a lot of hype and they've got some nice young pieces, there's a lot of buzz. The projections on some of these outlets don't fully add up, and some of them are a little bit higher. There's some inflation going on here. So keep that in mind as you're drafting.
To your point, Mike, if you look at full season, fantasy season 1 through 17, yes, he was QB5 when it was all said and done because of those massive games at the end. If you look at just weeks 1 through 15, before he had those huge back-to-back games in the fantasy playoffs, on a points per game basis, he was QB12. So,
yeah,
I mean, could he take a step forward? Sure. And again, like I said, the schedule should be difficult. I feel like they're going to be passing the ball still a bunch. So they're still going to be chasing points. The defense isn't as great as them going to the Super Bowl might lead you to believe. So it's not entirely out of the question that he still throws the ball a ton. But to me, this is where you get into the whole crux of ranking the quarterbacks in general. Like I have it broken down as the tiers. I have 4 guys at the top that are all the rushing QBs. It's very hard to break into the top 5 as a quarterback who doesn't rush the ball. Like Joe Burrow doesn't give you that rushing yardage. Whereas Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, like you're talking about Brady, Prescott, Rodgers, Wilson, all those guys, they're more stationary, but I feel like there are a couple guys at least in there that have more upside than Burrow does, especially for his current ADP. But I think we're all mostly in line with that.
Oh, it's funny. You could go through it. Like, in order for me, my tier 1 is all the guys with the high rushing floor. Tier 2 is 2 guys. It's Herbert and Mahomes because they possess not 0 rushing floor, but the ability to actually get it done. And then tier 3, you go right to Joe Burrow, and I have Tom Brady right next to it, and Dak
Right
and Aaron
behind,
Rodgers.
yep.
It's all your statues. That's your.
And then
That's
it's just age.
the way.
Yep.
And then it goes that way. So quarterback is actually fairly easy to break down because you can't get into that tier 1 unless you have that rushing floor anymore. That's it.
Yeah.
right.
All right, running back. Joe Mixon, Samaje Perine, Chris Evans, who is a wide receiver converted to running back, second-year player now. So what do we think about Mixon in general? He is annually one of the most polarizing players at the top of the RB list, right? Like, is he top 12? Is he? Some people want to put him top 5. Some people don't even want him in the top 15. He's all over the freaking place. You can't decide what you want to do with Joe Mixon. Neil, where do you rank Joe Mixon? How do you feel about him?
I have Joe Mixon at RB9, and historically, I'm usually pretty okay with Joe Mixon. Is he the most efficient cat on the block? No. Is he the best pure athlete running back on the block? No. But at the end of the day, consistently, year on year, he's kind of proven that he deserves to be in the bottom part of that top 10. Or if you don't really want to put him there, you can put him at 11 or 12. He's right in that neighborhood. He's got some warts. It's not perfect. I wouldn't call him injury prone, but he's certainly no stranger to missing a couple games throughout the season. But when he's on the field, the Bengals trust him, and the Bengals are going to have a good offense again. I'm pretty confident with him being just inside the top 10. That's usually where I'm good with him.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have him at RB10 or 11, something along those lines, because we have an improved offensive line. And for years, Mixon has been the running back that you would like kind of target at the end of the first round, beginning of the second round, maybe mid-second round, basically every year.
Yeah.
And it's going to be no different this year. Sometimes I think some people might feel ballsy and like make him in the middle of the first round just to make a point if they're really into him. I wouldn't, but I think there's going to be those players. There are people that do that. He's got an improved offensive line. He's on a good offense. But he has been the epitome of a like boomer bust running back last season because he had 7 games over 24 PPR points and he had 4 games under 10 PPR points. Like, he had a lot of duds. And that's because, like I said earlier with Burrow, first half of the season, they were really run heavy oriented. Mixon got a lot of touches and got plenty of touchdowns. Second half of the season, he wasn't seeing as much work. He was out snapped on 3rd down and 4th down more than double by Samaje Perine.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just, okay, so you're not seeing the receiving down work. but you still get receiving work. He still had targets, but he just didn't see them on third down.
Right.
So it's limiting his upside, I think, based on what the last season usage was amongst the backfield.
It would depend on where you look at it too, because yes, what sticks out like the sore thumb for him is weeks 13 to 15, like the lead up to the playoffs, and then the first week of the playoffs, like you're talking about the 3 games under 10 points. But that whole back half in general, weeks 8 through 17, he was running back 3. Like he was going on a tear through that whole last half of the season as they were making that push to try to make it into the playoffs, win the division, and then ultimately go on their Super Bowl run. But to me, I've got him at RB7. ADP has him at RB7. My only logic there is I feel like we've seen it from him before. We have the upside. I feel confident in the guys that I have in the top 6. And then the guys that I have in the same mix with him in the back half of that top end running back, it's DeAndre Swift. So do I want Mixon on the better offense or Swift on the Lions? I'll take the better offense. So I hedge to Mixon. Aaron Jones, age, and he's got the thighs creeping up behind him. A.J. Dillon. Derrick Henry, also age and the injury. At some point, the wheels have to fall off of that. So again, I hedge to Mixon. Saquon Barkley, younger guy, but has been dealing with the injuries. And again, bad offense. That's really it. It's just Mixon in that area just won a bunch of tiebreakers for me to move up the list from essentially 11 to 7. But I could understand anybody making the argument for him anywhere in there, however you want to break it down. So the question is, if something were to happen to Mixon, do you care at all about what's behind him?
Yeah, does it go handcuff or does it go running back by committee? I would argue that it's kind of hard to care. I mean, Mike, you mentioned it. You mentioned it. You know, Samaje Perine did get a good amount of the third down work, and they do like him. But they also drafted Chris Evans to kind of wait in the wings. So the way I view it is, this is one of the ones that's a little scary for me because we've talked about over the last 2 days being able to get really inexpensive handcuffs that you could trust. Here, I don't feel that way. I've got Samaje Perine and Chris Evans basically right on top of each other. I think if something were to happen, they would split that job down the middle, and then it's just a question of who's going to get the passing down work. My theory is that it's probably Evans, but then that's the way that I'm kind of evaluating it for this year. I don't think there's one guy that you could feel good about just picking up to replace Mixon. It's going to be a little ugly.
Yeah, I have a similar sentiment there because even last year when Perine had the opportunity, because Mixon was banged up at some points in the season, he did nothing.
Yep.
He did not do anything for you. So I would think that if the Bengals are sitting there this season and Mixon were to go down or something along those lines, it would just be more pass heavy and a committee in the backfield of just like getting by until Mixon were to return.
It's one of those weird, like how different teams use the same player situations, right? Because basically every stop that he's been along, Perine's been the pass catching back. He's been more involved. And like you're even saying, Mike, he was more involved on the third downs and in red zones near the back half of the season than Mixon was. Yet you've got Chris Evans, who's the third guy here, who is a wide receiver converted to running back. So he's clearly a good pass catcher. Like he's able to do it. He's not playing wide receiver anymore. I understand that, but he can catch the ball. He has that ability. He wouldn't be in the league right now if he couldn't. So I feel like what Neil is saying is more accurate here in that it's going to be Perine who's getting the between the tackles and the goal line work maybe, but it would still be third down Chris Evans. They would really share the job and it would just be so muddy. I don't care about any of it. So it's Mixon or bust for me in this situation. let's look at wide receiver. And, oh, boy, last year in the draft, as soon as they grabbed Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd was officially dead, it was just one of the top moments of my life. It's right up there.
Yeah, I was gonna. What is it? It's kids then marriage.
It's marrying my wife. It's my kids being born. It's Tyler Boyd losing his job to Jamar Chase. That's the pecking order right now.
I do want to point out that Boyd is a former Pitt alum as well. That we just keep bashing all these Pitt players, and
it's not intentional. Okay, it's just working out that way.
It's one of these weird coincidences.
We just have a very big trend going.
It's just a weird coincidence.
Like I understood the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks were bad quarterbacks. So like Tyler Boyd's actually a good wide receiver.
Well, what you're missing is 3 or 4 years worth of context where we've had to sit here and battle against people on the internet that want to say that Tyler Boyd
that's always been my thing. Tyler Boyd is a fantastic flex.
He's fine, for fantasy. That. But when he was going way earlier,
back end ish wide receiver 2 at the very most. When people wanted to say he was a virtual wide receiver 1 or a high end wide receiver 2, I took a lot of umbrage with
that. Was the problem.
I got a lot of heat for saying he was not as good as you think he is. And I am glad to have stood on that hill and not died at all, lived and survived. But yes, Jamar Chase comes in second year. He had a fantastic rookie season. I still, the saying the ball looks different and the stripes go a different direction and all of that last off season, having to have those discussions. My goodness. That was so great. But again, like he's one of these guys where he has become a premier. This is my guy. I'm going to plant my flag. I've seen him go as high as top 3 in wide receiver in drafts. So he's one of those, if you want Jamar Chase, you really have to pay up for him. I have him at wide receiver 9. It's not, again, that I don't believe. It's that I do believe T. Higgins still has a significant role in this offense.
Let me get into that in a second here because I've got him at 6. So it's weird. It's like, why do you hate Jamar Chase? I don't, but you guys have him at 3. And like when I say you guys, I mean that's where the ECR has.
Yeah.
So if you want Jamar Chase, you will be putting in a wide receiver 3 overall level. And there's just as much as I love him, there's just too much volatility to really want to get there. There's a few guys I like more than that, and it kind of turns me off the whole thing. This is where I was talking about inflation a moment ago. Yeah. This is kind of one of the examples. You can really see it clearly in the wide receiver room more than you can in the running back or the quarterback suite. But as we go further into it, I think people will see what I'm referring to. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm actually was surprised when I saw your guys in comparison to the ECR and was happy with it because I am right there with you. I am not paying a top 3 wide receiver price for a
right now
alpha.
He's going mid first round.
Yeah, I'm good.
In
one of 2 alphas
PPR.
On a team.
Yeah. Right.
Because
I'm good.
We're sitting there and T. Higgins is going a couple rounds later, but when T. Higgins was healthy, like in per game basis, he averaged more targets and more receptions per game than Jamar Chase. So like when he was on the field, he was seeing just as much work, if not more work, than Jamar Chase. And I think the big thing will be is we're going to see, as we saw in the fantasy playoffs, the first round of the fantasy playoffs for most people, T. Higgins went off with like 40 points, and Jamar Chase did not do as well. That very next week, Jamar Chase went off, and T. Higgins was down in like single digits. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like that's just undeniable.
As much volume as they have, to sustain both of them where people are recommending that they be drafted, it's going to require them to be humming on all cylinders every single week with this crazy efficiency rate if you're going to make any sense of these numbers. Because let's talk about that. I've been on Steve knows this. I've been on T. Higgins since he was a rookie. Like I was pounding the table for him when he was coming into the league. And this year they've got, not only do they have Jamar Chase in the ECR as wide receiver 3, they've got T. Higgins as wide receiver 11. And for the first time in years since I've been doing this, I have to back up and say, whoa. How does everyone suddenly love in 2 years? How does everybody suddenly love T. Higgins more than me? I'm the guy who's been pumping him up, and now I'm looking at that like that's insane. to make both of those numbers work, you'd have to be operating at this efficiency level that I just don't even know is possible for this team to achieve. Because not to completely bury the lead here, but Steve, you've got T. Higgins at wide receiver 19. I've got him at wide receiver 16. I think that's fair.
Mhm.
You're talking about upper echelon wide receiver 2, which is what he
Yeah.
is. Because you're going to have those huge 40, 35, 40-point weeks. But it's T. Higgins, as I've pointed out for years on years. You're going to take some 8s along the way.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. So
Yeah.
this all scares me.
To what
All of
you're
this is
talking
scary.
about, Mike, like at the beginning of the year, the first 2 weeks of the season, T. Higgins was leading the team in targets. He was the number 1 over Jamar Chase. He gets hurt. 2 weeks, it's Jamar Chase. And then in week 5, Higgins comes back healthy. And weeks 5 through 14, basically the rest of the fantasy season, in PPR, Jamar Chase was wide receiver 8. Higgins was wide receiver 16. That's basically what I'm projecting. That's basically what I'm looking at. That's basically what I'm assuming. And even then, you had weeks 5 and 6 when Higgins was really getting his feet underneath him. So if you take out those first 2 weeks back from injury and you just look at weeks 7 through 14, Higgins was wide receiver 13. Chase was wide receiver 14. They were right on top of each other. And it was Higgins who was the number 1, like you're saying. And then, of course, week 16, he had that huge 43-point performance that absolutely blew up in the playoffs. But it's so much between the two of them, depending on matchups, depending on situations, that it could be either one of them at any given time. If I can get T. Higgins right now 2 full rounds later than Jamar Chase, I'm still getting a 1B, if not the 1A, on this passing offense for, again, a supreme discount.
Yeah, if you took either of these wide receivers off and put them on another team, and you're looking at this Bengals offense with Tyler Boyd as the number 2 to either one of them, these players, the number 1 wide receiver would skyrocket up and be even better.
Yeah.
But
if you're telling me T. Higgins doesn't exist and it's Chase and Boyd, then Jamar Chase is the top 5 wide receiver.
Easily.
Slam dunk, no doubt. But that's not the case.
Nope.
Yeah. So then the only question left is, do you care about Tyler Boyd?
Well, we talked about it briefly a second
I like
ago.
him just as a player, but no, not really.
No. Well, here's the thing. I didn't even put the ECR on here, Steve, because it's pretty much right where we have him. You've got him at 52. I've got him at 57. He's finally come back to the place where he always should have been.
Yeah.
This is where he lives.
52 and ADP as well.
If you want him as a flex for your team, as your 4th or 5th wide receiver, great. He'll have some serviceable weeks for you, in PPR especially.
And then if something were to happen to either Higgins or Chase, he steps into a nice spot.
He'll at least have the opportunity. Whether or not he can do anything with it, I don't know. But
that's the question mark.
That's always been the problem.
Because, like, as I mentioned, he had the 2 games last year in weeks 3 and 4 when T. Higgins was out, and Boyd was theoretically just going to be the number 2 second fiddle to Jamar Chase, and he had a 13.5 and a 20 against Pittsburgh and Jacksonville. So serviceable. I mean, decent flex territory. So if you're telling me I can grab him at upside in the 11th round, that's much more reasonable. But so far this offseason, at least in the Underdog drafts I've been in and in a couple of the redraft stuff that I do, it's always been, there's always some kind of lingering Tyler Boyd truther who wants him in the 7th or 8th round still. It's like, he's still there. He's still my boy.
Someone who thinks it's still 2018. Like
who's still holding on to hope that Tyler Boyd at age only 27, it's not like he's completely out of it. Like, he's going into his theoretical wide receiver prime right now, but he is easily the 3rd option in this passing offense. So
because he's playing with 2 elites.
Exactly. To me, I'm not really interested in Tyler Boyd. If he were to fall to me in the 12th round, I would certainly consider it, but I just don't see that ever happening. All right, tight end. Hayden Hurst, the new tight end 1 coming over from Atlanta / Baltimore before then. And Drew Sample's still there. They still have Thad Moss?
They do.
Thad Moss. That's interesting. But there you go. So Hayden Hurst taking over for CJ Uzama. Poor CJ heading over to the Jets.
It's so
Okay.
sad.
You say poor, but I mean, you got a pretty good contract out of it.
That's
Yeah,
a good
but
point.
he's on the Jets.
When that's where
Mm.
the veteran tight end goes to die historically, which
I
is what's
guess.
well, it happens a lot.
And two of them did it this year.
Right.
Yeah,
They were both
Mhm.
like, let's see who's gonna die first.
A fight to the death in preseason. I love it. I don't think there's anything really to note here at tight end. These are neither of these are people I'm interested in.
Drew Sample doesn't do much besides block at this point, and
Mhm.
Hayden Hurst. Hayden Hurst is, I would argue, inferior as catching the ball to CJ Uzama, who we've historically have been high on. But no, the ECR has him at 25. I think this is another example of inflation. I've got him at 28. Steve, I know you've got him at 31. This is not something that I'm interested in. And we talk about tight end flyers all the time. Wait until the end. Wait until the end. Take your flyers. If you've gotten to here, you've waited too far. I hate to tell you.
Yeah, definitely.
There can't possibly be a situation where this is the only tight end left.
Yeah, that's
There's
not,
no way.
It's
There's got to be
it's gotta be
something better.
impossible.
Unless your league just got tight end happy and like every team has 3, then you're like, all right, well, now I'm gonna have to deal with Hayden Hurst as my tight end 1 and just
Even
punt the position.
still, there still has to be a better
There's
option.
got to be,
No,
or there will be in a few
11.
weeks on the waiver wire.
I was gonna say
Mhm.
10 or 11 teams sit there and pick 3 tight ends. That's gonna add up.
Yeah.
It's never gonna happen. You're
What league is that?
I don't know.
So defense and kicker wise, I have the defense rated 3. I have it rated higher than ADP and the ECR. The reason I'm so high on the Bengals defense is because the one thing they did do well is take the ball away. And turnovers matter. So giving up points, giving up yardage can be a negative, but depending on your scoring settings, it's all about can you take the ball away, interceptions and fumbles. Those are the big things, as well as sacks. They get to the quarterback pretty effectively. So I still think they're not going to be very good from an NFL perspective, but from a fantasy perspective, they'll give you the stats that you're looking for. And then Evan McPherson, I have, I believe, let me double check. He's either number 1 or number 2. Yeah, number 1 for me in my kickers. Pretty consistent, hits most of them and can hit from distance. And again, the PATs absolutely help. So he's just in that top tier of kicker for me in terms of consistency. Can you hit from distance? All of that. So yeah, both of these special teams I'm interested in from the Bengals if you can get them. But again, as always, only interested in the 15th or 16th round of your draft.
Okay, I'm not interested in the Bengals, but I will say I do have McPherson at 5.
Yeah.
The only reason I'm at 5 is because of age. It's only his second season in the league, so I'd like to see him.
Like I said,
do it
depends
again.
on your scoring settings. Like like I mentioned a couple episodes ago with the defense, I have the Bucks and the Bills in a tier by themselves, and then everybody else. You can make an argument for literally anybody beyond that. I have the Bengals at 3 just because they get takeovers and sacks. That's it. So, any closing thoughts here, Cincinnati?
Just beware of the crazy inflation market. Just keep it in mind as you're watching people go through the draft.
T. Higgins is cheap Jamar Chase. Just remember that, and you'll be fine. All right. We will be back tomorrow. New episode with the Dallas Cowboys. But until then, everybody, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!